Hello and welcome to the SOFEA Sessions podcast. Today's shorthand episode is with our CEO, Richard Kennell, who has come on to talk about SOFEA's strategy moving forward. Richard reflects on the past 9 years of SOFEA and how this, combined with the ever-changing environment we exist in, will shape our mission moving into our 10th year. If you are interested in what we can do to drive positive community change using innovative ways of thinking and meaningful partnerships, then this is the episode for you. Hi Richard.
Hi Nick.
How are you doing?
All right, thank you.
Good. Obviously, so we're talking today about the SOFEA strategy moving forward. You being the CEO of obviously putting a lot of work into planning for the future, but also reflecting on the past 10 years. I think it's this month we're coming into our 10th year as a charity, is that right?
Yeah, we're just at the start of our 10th year. Yeah.
What sort of lessons have you learned in that time period?
I think we've learned an awful lot over the 9 years that we've been operating that's going to inform the next 9 years and beyond, I think. I'd just pull out, I think, two key strands of that. One is the nature of the work that we are doing has changed very significantly over those 9 years. And the other is that the world around us has changed a lot as well. And if we're going to talk about strategy in a moment, I don't think you can do that without looking at the external environment and the way that we operate within it. So just picking up what we've learned in terms of our own operations and the way we do things, I think very quickly, 9 years ago when we launched, we became conscious that the employability program that we were running to get young people ready for and into work through the context of working in our food redistribution warehouse. I think, firstly, the most powerful thing I think that we underestimated when we started was the value of having young people doing their work experience effectively in that environment, because the sense of purpose that they are able to get from doing something of value to other people is something that certainly in the early days I'd underestimated. The other thing about the way that we operate that I think certainly I've learned, and many of my colleagues have too, is that just putting on short-term skills-based employability programs is not the solution to the problem that we're trying to solve. And certainly the therapeutic approaches that we've developed in more recent years have been a response to the fact that we need to work with young people and with older people as well, often on their coping strategies, on their strategies that they have for leading successful lives and affecting behavioural changes before you can start doing skill building, because the ultimate aim is not to get people a job. In the economy that we operate in even today in South Oxfordshire particularly, and Milton Keynes as well, getting a job isn't the hard part. Having the strategies and the ability to sustain that job and to enable it to enable you to have a fulfilling life is key. So the first part of what we've learned is that the therapeutic approaches that we've introduced, the formal education pieces that we are strong on in terms of maths and English particularly, as well as the employability skills, all come together in a way that we hadn't really anticipated when we started, and we're much better at articulating now. And then, of course, the world's changed massively around us. I think perhaps starting with the pandemic, where the reliance of large parts of our community on our food through the distribution network became very, very important. And out of that, the development of the larder network to continue to support people through cost of living crisis has massively become massively more important. But again, coming back to the same point as the internal approaches, if people are coming to use discounted, cheaper food sources at food banks or at our community larders, it begs the question of why are they coming there, and what else can we do to support them, and that's developing in our thinking. And the other thing that's changed recently, I think, is the pressure that the sector is under. So in terms of having to respond to a cost of living crisis, having to respond to changes in society at a time when that support appears to be diminishing from other sources.
Yeah, I think that's such an important reflection, isn't it? Like, our environment around us is constantly changing, and the things that we need to do this work is constantly more insecure in some respects. Like you say, pressure on the sector, demand is much higher, obviously coming from a therapeutic set of glasses, if you like. The need is much more complex. So it's interesting reflecting on the fact that we're constantly having to almost do like dynamic risk assessments for everything we do and respond to those crises. But obviously, I know through conversations that we've been having at SOFEA, the direction that I think we're working towards is actually not just fighting the fires anymore, but actually trying to preempt what some of those challenges might be over the next 9 years, for example.
Yeah, and I think, again, I try to look at the internal approach to that and the external factors affecting it. So we've tried very hard over the 9 years to create a sense of community within our walls and within the beneficiaries that we serve. And some of the things that I think have worked tremendously well that we didn't really plan when we started was that engagement of young people who come to us in distress with very low self-worth, very little hope. We've managed to engage those young people in a program, but wider than that, as part of a community that operates in ways that supports them and supports their futures. And I think probably the single biggest thing I'm proudest of in the 9 years we've been operating is that of a staff of about 75, nearly half are young people aged under 25 who came to us with very low qualifications, often very poor mental health, without much hope of a successful future. And nearly half our staff are now providing that support and that benefit back to the communities. And that's a big piece of learning that I think we need to develop in our strategic thinking as we go forward. The external piece is the fact that I think we have developed responses to adversity, disadvantage, disengagement that work, but it's always in my mind that what we should be doing is intervening earlier, so that people that we work with don't have to work so hard to overcome those barriers, if we could find ways to intervene much earlier and prevent them from happening. So if we're moving on to talk about our strategy as we move forward, the two prongs of it are very much, one is around mitigating need and disadvantage as it exists now. There are people in distress, there are people who need our support. We have to do that. But if that's all we're doing, then what we're doing is effectively accepting the status quo and just saying, well, we'll deal with the fallout from it. That's not what we're trying to do. As well as mitigating that immediate need, what we're also trying to do is to say, well, actually, there are better methods, there are better ways of working that mean that we don't have to put people in that position. And that's about trying to change, in a small way often, but change the approach of other organisations and other parts of the environment, so that we don't get into a situation where there are so many people that need our support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about, obviously, that's the kind of broader strategic thinking going forward. How is SOFEA as an organisation going to try and action some of that stuff? What does that look like practically? So
in the coming 3 years, we've got a plan to start to develop some aspects of the work that we do in really interesting ways. In the coming year, what that means is a couple of highlights that I'll pull out of that. One is the approach to employment, particularly for young people. I think we often make assumptions that young people aren't ready for work or will struggle with work. And sometimes the education system and sometimes the way that we operate our education program doesn't support them in getting closer to work. It's my contention that working with local employers, we can put those young people into good jobs quicker, get them employed, get them earning, and continue to provide that support for them while they're in work. Not so much doing a pre-employment program, but doing a support program alongside their employment. And some of this thinking comes from very old-fashioned views that there are a group of young people who, when they reach the end of compulsory schooling, will be best suited going straight into work. If we can find good jobs with good employers that are committed to progressing and developing them, that continue to train them, I think that's a much better solution for lots of young people that we work with than extended, drawn-out programs pre-employment. So that's one thing that I'm really excited about, and we're really lucky to be working in an environment where there's lots of local businesses that are supporting that and working with us to start that program very, very shortly. The other key objective in this regard is the community larders. We have about 30 community larders supporting about 3,500 people. People come because they get access to food at a membership fee that is significantly less than the cost to purchase the food. But those full service larders of implementing other services while people are there getting their food, particularly around mental health and employability, digital access, so that people can begin to move towards living a more engaged life and moving towards more purposeful life rather than just being dependent on the food. Those are the two key ones I think that stand out for the coming year. Over the summer this year, we are also building our commercial kitchen. It's going to give us another strand to the work to train young people to not just cook for themselves, but cook on a commercial basis, and hopefully use some of the surplus food that we have to cook ourselves and extend its life, and to provide food for all the young people that come into the building on a daily basis. Today, actually, the fume cupboard arrived for our science lab, so we're also putting in a science lab over the summer. And the aim with that, working with Bill, who's our fantastic volunteer, is to give young people an opportunity to work in a lab environment, do some really exciting, fun science stuff, but give them the opportunity to work in that environment and then perhaps progress into lab technician roles in lots of the local companies that are crying out for that sort of level of skill. Again, working with those local companies, trying to provide a solution to them to a tight labour market, but also trying to provide good jobs with progression routes for young people that come to SOFEA. So that means that in September, when our new cohort of young people starts on our study programme, within the building we will have opportunities to work within our warehousing operation. We'll also have an IT suite, a gym, a kitchen, a science lab, and an art room, as well as fully functioning classrooms and an English and maths provision.
So obviously that's kind of a really good example of like some of the new exciting opportunities that are going to happen in the next year or so at SOFEA. Have you got any strategic thinking a little bit further forward than that? So thinking about our broader mission and vision as a charity?
The board and the senior team and myself think that the organisation should be ambitious, because we think that there is need, and we think that the programmes that we run are really successful, and that we should be ambitious in developing and growing those. And that means doing more work in more places and doing it better. We haven't set any targets for the next 10 years, but the board is very keen that we are ambitious, and that might mean growing to new sites, new places, replicating the model, perhaps not always with food at the core, but with a social enterprise that's adding value to others, as well as the therapeutic approaches and the education programme. So the big picture going forward is that we want to be ambitious and we want to develop this work. In the short term, that means that we are working with other fair share sites across the country who have looked at our employability programs in particular, and started to ask us to help them form their own. And we're providing some consultancy at the moment to the Felix project in London, which is really exciting. They've got the same food redistribution set up, and they've got their own kitchen which produces huge amounts of meals, but what they haven't got is an employability program. And in the coming years we're hoping to work very closely with them and develop that. In the wider community and in the communities in which we operate, I think we're beginning to take a role, hesitate to say a leading role, but a coordinating role perhaps, around what's going on in our communities, what the main challenges in our communities are, and how we can help pull people together, pull organisations together to create a more powerful response to some of those needs. I've already talked a little bit about the employment programme, trying to respond to the needs of employers, but also getting young people into work quicker. That's going to take a community-based approach with those employers across both the sites that we operate in. But also thinking about the therapeutic approaches that we operate, and thinking about how we might develop those out beyond our own environment and coordinate or influence the communities that we operate in. I think one of the things that is often cited as if it's a fact is that there's a mental health epidemic, particularly amongst young people. And while I completely subscribe to the fact that there are a lot of people whose mental health is very poor and needs specialist treatment, I think we could reframe the conversation around low-level mental health issues, talk more openly about mental health, but talk about it as something that we need to maintain and sustain our own mental health so that we don't become mentally ill. Once we become mentally ill, we need the specialist support to help. But if we can move into a good discussion about how mental well-being, mental wellness is important, and how we sustain our own mental health, then we can bring together resources from across the communities to help us do that. We can have a shared understanding within our communities of why it's important to do that and what strategies we use. We can pull together different groups working in different ways and try to ensure that the communities that we work within are a bit more resilient, a bit more conscious of what needs to happen to lead happy and healthy lives.
Yeah, and I think the really kind of important point around that is that we are aiming to listen to community voice. So I think part of the benefit of working with all of our local partners and all kind of trying to have that shared understanding of what the community currently looks like, but also listening to them based on their perception of what the pain points are in their community. So I think it's no good us going in and, completely re-transforming the community if it's not what people want. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's a lot of people doing a lot of very good work. It's about trying to help them to coordinate that in better ways, to have better value to our communities, and to look at things, look at how the future's unfolding as well, and look at ways in which we can respond. We talked earlier about how the world is changing around us, and if you just to take three key themes out of that, I think the digital world is changing around us. Artificial intelligence is becoming, well, it's been around for 60 odd years, but it's becoming now more mainstream and more in the public eye. And rather than being afraid of that, working with that and saying, well, how can we work with AI to benefit the communities that we work with in ways that are going to benefit them? One of the exciting projects we've got underway at the moment is to look at how AI might support a mental health tool, which is really interesting. We need to do more on our environmental footprint ourselves, but we also need to be preparing the young people we work with for the future in a world where climate change is clearly having a massive influence, and doing things to help mitigate that, but also to educate young people and make them aware of what they need to do as they move forward. And the third thing, and I think it is really clearly linked to those two, the climate emergency and the AI revolution, is what's our place as citizens in that world? Because it's very different to the world I grew up in, and to have a kind of agency, a personal agency about your role as a citizen in a world that's changing, I think is really important. So those three themes of citizenship, environmental awareness, and awareness of AI in the digital revolution, I think are really critical. I think underpinning all of that is a questioning of the expectations and the norms that we live our lives in. I think what would I ask listeners to do is just to question those assumptions that we make all the time, and to think about why things are happening that way and what can we do to make things better. Sometimes there's a really good reason why things work the way that they do. Often there isn't. And thinking differently about the way that things are done leads you to conclusions that are more sustainable, leads you to conclusions that enable you to lead a happier and healthier life personally. But if enough of us do that, then we can influence the way things work so that everybody can benefit.
I agree. I think it's that really nice balance between curiosity and being critical, like thinking in a critical way and trying to challenge those norms, like you said.
It's absolutely not cynicism. It's absolutely not everything's broken, so why would we bother? It is a healthy skepticism. It's asking why, and often asking people in authority and people in positions of influence why, and then becoming aware and drawing conclusions and acting on them.
A big thank you to our CEO Richard for coming onto the podcast today. As always, if you want to find out more about what we do at SOFEA, you can visit our website www.sofea.uk.com, or you can get in touch at wellbeing@sofea.uk.com. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and you can leave your comments and feedback on whatever podcast channel you listen on.